when the light bulb goes off, that's very rewarding to me. That's what motivates me to keep on doing what I do. And then that just keeps that cycle going of helping one person, one team at a time, and expanding that out.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Kyle Kumpf to the show. Now, I first came across Kyle on LinkedIn, where I found his communication style to be extremely well thought out and respectful. On today's show, Kyle walks us through his 8-year continuous improvement journey, including how he started his career as a packaging engineer and now, several years later, leads the process improvement initiatives inside a bank. Now, show notes for this episode, which will include links to everything we discuss, can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Just look for episode 219. You can also check out Gemba Academy's Lean Learning System over at gembaacademy.com with a fully functional trial. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the show, Kyle. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
All right. Yeah, I think I've was following some of your recent LinkedIn articles and comments and all the rest of it, and always find you pretty intriguing on LinkedIn. So I reached out to you, saw if you wanted to come on to the podcast. So again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, again, and thanks for having me. And I'm glad you were able to get some value out of my opinions that I like to post on LinkedIn so frequently.
Yeah. In fact, before we get into the regular interview, I have to ask, how does it work as being an outgoing introvert? You say I'm an outgoing introvert. How's that work?
Well, it's funny because I have an engineering background, and engineers, the stereotype is they like to just dig in and hide behind a computer screen and work there and not really interact with people. Whereas I love to actually get out and interact with people and talk to them and collaborate. However, I do like to recharge by being alone.
Yeah.
And so what I've been told is that, like my wife, who's an extrovert, she likes to recharge by being around more people. And I'm the opposite. So I can go in small spurts of being very social, talking to people, interacting with them. But that zaps a lot of my energy, so I have to take that time to recharge, and I recharge by being alone, whether it's just resting, meditating, reading a book, or something of that nature.
No, that's really cool. A long time ago, I took it wasn't Myers-Briggs, it was one of these, personality kind of profile test or whatever, and one of the things they said about me was that I want to be invited to your party, Kyle, but I'm probably not going to come. So I don't know what that says about me. I want to be invited. I get my feelings hurt if I'm not invited, but I'm probably not going to come, So yeah.
Well, I get invited to a lot of parties, but I also don't go to a lot of them. But it does feel good to feel wanted. Yeah. So you have that option to go.
There you go. Awesome. Well, hey, Kyle, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about your background, how you first came to learn about continuous improvement, and then definitely what you're up to these days.
Yeah, great. So I actually have a little bit of a unique background, or maybe I just think it's unique because it's me. But I went to school for engineering, so specifically packaging engineering. And most people don't know what that means, and my mom likes to joke that I went to school to become a glorified box maker.
Yeah, okay.
However, there's much more to it than that. It's very similar to it, and I like to say it's a good mix of industrial engineering, graphic design, and marketing. So it was a very fun and engaging degree to go for. Graduated from that, started work as a packaging engineer for I think they were the largest or one of the largest mail order catalog companies, the Swiss Colony, based in Monroe, Wisconsin, and worked as a packaging engineer for them for about 3 years. And that's where I was introduced to the whole concept of continuous improvement, lean thinking, and those various tools that go along with it. And I left there and went out on my own to do consulting work. And that's where I started to practice, focusing more on lean, more on continuous improvement, and helping other organizations on their lean journeys, wherever they might be. Mm-hmm. And that was very successful. I had a lot of clients here locally where I live, and also out in Boston, which required a lot of travel. And then that's when I had to evaluate the family situation. We have young children, so I started looking for something else that didn't require so much travel, but still wanted to be able to practice what I was doing with continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. And luckily found a local position, which brings me to where I am now, and that's working for a bank of all places. I'm an engineer that works for a bank, trying to work with the various business units and frontline workers and management to view everything that we do as a process, as a value stream, and ideas, opportunities for improvement.
Nice. Well, sounds like a fun journey.
It has been.
All right. Well, let me start, Kyle, with just a general question here. And what is continuous improvement to you? Like, how would you, if someone asked you, hey, what's this continuous improvement stuff about? What would you say?
Yeah, I've got a kind of a quick definition that I actually talk to those about when I'm doing trainings and things and presentations at work. And I think continuous improvement to me is two things. One, it's a mindset, and two, it's a system. So by mindset, I mean it's a form of thinking. So constantly thinking what can be versus what is. And I have an example of, the term is lean thinking, not lean manufacturing. So lean thinking can be applied to any process, any organization, any industry. So that's the mindset piece of continuous improvement. And then there's the system side, which I view as simply the process and tools for bringing those new ideas, those that come from the thinking, into reality.
Talk a little bit more about the mindset. I remember seeing something on your LinkedIn profile that I really liked. Critical on process, not people, right? So
right.
Talk a little bit more about what that means to you.
I've learned very early on that you're not going to get very far if you start criticizing people. And at the end of the day, people are just following a process that they've likely been given, and they likely weren't even involved in creating it. And that process is what's outputting or creating the errors and the defects or the problems. So it's about going to the people who are using that process and asking them, okay, what about this process is not allowing you to perform the way that is desired? So it's just a softer way of going back and figuring out a problem without attacking the person and making and tearing them down.
Yeah, it's funny. Almost don't even want to mention this, but speaking of LinkedIn and social media, there's a couple folks out there in our lean world who almost have I don't know if they're just angry people or what, but they're very critical about other folks within the continuous improvement movement. Heck, they recently attacked Gemba Academy for being online training and laugh out loud, or something, just being really ugly. And I often wonder, like, what draws people to this, I don't know, this way of, it's not even just way of being, just like negative and attacking people, just flat out saying, just being really ugly. So yeah, it's great to hear you talk about, being critical on the process, not the people. But gosh, there's so many people out there who just are the opposite, and it just sucks the wind out of me. Just I don't even want to respond to them because I don't want to waste my energy just acknowledging them. But it's still, here I am talking about it on a podcast.
Yeah, those people are out there, and I have friends who are very popular on social media that actually build their businesses around LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and that's how they generate their living. And there's some pretty nasty comments that get put out there about them, and I like to tell them, you know what, if no one's being negative to you, if no one's criticizing you, then you're probably not doing something right.
Yeah.
So the fact that they are, you're probably doing something right. Keep it up.
There you go. Okay, we got attacked, so we're doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
Well, because that means you're making an impact. I mean, you're obviously doing something, because if you weren't making an impact, then no one would notice you, and therefore they couldn't criticize you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thinking on it.
Yeah, good way of looking at it. So let's talk a little bit more. You touched on it in the opening there about your beginning, but talk a little bit more about how you got started. Like, what were those early days like?
Yeah, so my early days at Swiss Colony, the position I was in was actually split. So part of it was around packaging engineering, so developing, testing, packaging for our products so they could survive the distribution environment from our warehouse, from our suppliers to our warehouses to our customers. And the other side of it was more on the operations of a fulfillment site. And we had the site that I was in was, at the time, I think it still is, the largest one. It's over 500,000 square feet. They had combined another fulfillment site into this one. And that's really what created the opportunity for my job to be there. And so we took another large warehouse, put it into a smaller footprint. And obviously that comes with its own challenges. Like you don't have as much space to utilize. You don't have much room for inventory to fulfill orders. So I worked with our process, I think it's called our process engineering manager. Mm-hmm. And he had a background in lean and had applied it whenever he had run some other operations with other organizations. And he introduced me to it and said, all right, let's take a look at this problem. Here's what we have to achieve. Here's where we are now, which, it's not where we need to be. So how can we go back and look at this process? And, it's easy in that realm because it's physical. You can see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And how can we increase the capacity for orders or order fulfillment? And so that's when we started just basically using the basic lean tools of, pull, tack time, and those types of things. And that's where I first got introduced to it outside of a classroom session. Mm-hmm. I learned about it a little bit in college, and quite frankly, it kind of intimidated me. And at that point, I didn't have a real world experience to apply it to, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. But once I was out there in the real world and realized, yeah, this stuff is powerful. We need to use this because what currently is in place is not going to work, and it's not going to carry us forward to the future. So that was my very first beginning, and just going out and observing what happened as far as picking orders, fulfilling the orders on the packing line, shipping them out, identifying, kind of using the basic. I got education a little bit on the 7 waste or the 8 waste, mm-hmm. And learn how to identify those, and working with the people doing the work and saying, all right, I see you're doing a lot of waiting here. I see there's a lot of inventory here, or there's a lot of rework happening. So tell me more about this. So that's when I got my first start in it.
So thinking about packaging and whatnot, and, I guess the stereotype is, racks and racks and racks full of cardboard, right? Mm-hmm, so mm-hmm. Like, how do you balance that waste of inventory in the packaging world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the aspects of packaging is not to over-package a product. It's when you're shipping, one of the things we would ship would be these large electric fireplaces. You've probably seen them
mm-hmm.
in people's houses.
Yeah.
They weigh 120 pounds or more. Sometimes they come in multiple different cartons. And those, you could easily throw a lot of corrugated boxes at them, a lot of foams and things of that nature to package them in real nicely, and they would never be damaged. Mm-hmm. But you're going to spend a fortune on it, mm-hmm. and you're also going to. Then that increases the cube size of those products for storage. So then you have to have more space to handle a smaller volume of products. So in the packaging side, it's how do we use the least amount of material as possible, but still achieve the basics of packaging, which is to transport, contain, inform, and protect the product.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, being a lean thinking organization like it sounded you were, I mean, it's no different than anything else, right? I mean, if you have Kanban set up and whatnot, you hold a set amount of inventory, I guess, right? Right.
And like we essentially had in that small operation so the specific area I'm referring to was in our, the new area was what they called, I forget now. It was basically small items. So things that weighed like 20 pounds and less. Versus the other side of the warehouse, which was the larger items that were 20 pounds and up, 50 pounds, those things. So we essentially had a storehouse or a store of the inventory that would then be brought in to the picking areas where those orders be picked. And so speaking of Kanban, our order replenisher or our inventory replenishers would get notified when something needs to be replenished. And we had it organized to where they would start an hour earlier doing their replenishment than the pickers. And essentially, as they were going through replenishing, the pickers would follow right behind them, picking those orders. Mm-hmm. So we had minimal inventory down in the actual picking locations. So that way we could be flexible to order changes in demand. So we didn't have a whole aisle full of one product that sold one day, and then the next day we had to move all of it, just move something back in. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's people, they think, oh, this is really easy to do. And some of it is, but when you got to do that synchronization of things like that, that's where it becomes really, really powerful, but it's also a little more complex to pull off.
Yeah, for sure. So what about today, like within the banking industry, like what I don't know, things from your packaging life and whatnot, apply over into this very transactional environment?
Well, I wouldn't even say it's the packaging side. It's more of just the process.
Yeah.
No matter if you're just trying to, banks, the common things that everyone thinks about when they think of a bank, loans, or I take my money there and deposit it into an account. So no matter what kind of loan you're doing, whether it's a car loan all the way up to a complex, multi-million-dollar commercial loan, there's a process starting from start to finish. There's a supply chain life cycle of that loan that goes through from the time a banker meets with the customer to when that customer gets money in hand. And when you start to look at it that way and start to actually be critical on that process, on why things are happening, why there's quality issues, why there's defects, why it takes longer than we want it to take, it's very useful, and it goes to show that this whole mindset thing is applicable, to the service industry.
Mm-hmm. Do you see more acceptance, more resistance, or pretty much the same between, say, a transactional environment like a bank versus a manufacturing industry?
Yeah, and I would say, because I've worked when I was a consultant, I worked in other service environments, office environments, and I would say across any industry, the frontline people doing the work are very receptive to change. It's easier to get them to figure, see what needs to be changed, what to change to. And then I think it's more difficult with the management side, the people who aren't in the work day to day, trying to get them to see that same thing of, okay, here's the problem, here's what needs to be changed to, but then getting them to actually enact the change. That's where I find it to be more difficult, or more resistance to be there. Why
do you think that is?
I think part of it is probably a lack of understanding or education. It's one of the things I've been working on a lot lately, was helping people better define problems so that you can very quickly say, here's what's going wrong, here's the quantified impact, here's who it's affecting, here's where it's happening, here's the frequency, those 5 basic things. So you can very clearly and succinctly take that to someone who's not familiar with the process, but who doesn't do the process daily. Then they can look at that and say, oh, yeah, this is the problem, and you're recommending do this. Okay, now I see why you're recommending that. Here's what I can do to help you. Or they can also, they can do that collaboration. Whereas some people, we aren't educated to break down problems that way, or actually create clear problem statements. So we just tend to word vomit our frustrations, which then it's hard for people to then, figure out, what's actually the problem in there that I can try and help you solve.
Yeah, exactly. So one of my favorite books is called The Obstacle is a Way by a guy named Ryan Holiday. And it's a lot about stoicism and different things like that. But also he talks about when you come up against an obstacle, that's actually a good thing, because it's probably the way that you need to be going, because you need to work through that obstacle. So if you thinking back on your journey here with continuous improvement from the very beginning to present day, what sort of obstacles have you experienced?
That's a great question. Well, obviously the first one that probably comes to everybody's mind is just the resistance to change. You're moving my cheese. I'm very comfortable here in what I've been doing. Whether it's the way I've been doing this current process, or the way I've been managing people doing this process. And now you ask me to change that. It's always the most difficult obstacle to get through. But what I've found is, and this is, I think you'll see this on my LinkedIn profile, is just that takes this patient persistence.
Yeah.
I've taken a personality test, and it says that I'm patient, but I view myself as actually being quite impatient. I like to get things done. I like to work towards deadlines to keep things moving. Otherwise, things tend to fall or stall out. But yeah, it's just taking that persistence, continuously going back and taking different angles, providing different information, or just trying to convey the same problem to those obstacles in a different way to help them understand it. It actually reminds me of a quote that I have hanging on my door in my office. I look at it daily, especially if I'm, going against an obstacle. But it's by Warren Bennis, and he says that innovation, or any new idea, by definition, will not be accepted at first. It takes the repeated attempts, endless demonstrations, monotonous rehearsals before innovation can be accepted and internalized by an organization, and this requires courageous patience. And that's really, that's the only thing I can tell people. They ask, how do you overcome these constant obstacles? It's patience, persistence. That's how you get through it. And if you keep going into them, like you said in that book, you're probably hitting on the right thing. And eventually you'll hit that tipping point. The obstacle will fall, and you move forward, and you'll move forward to your next obstacle or your next problem, and just keep tackling them one by one.
Yeah. Love it. What else? Any other obstacles besides resistance to change?
So I think it kind of ties into the resistance to change. It's, so you got to where the problem is, what needs to change, what you need to change it to. You implement the change, and then people start following this new process, and then it's not going the way that it was designed or intended. And then you go on back to, we didn't quite understand the current condition, or we misinterpreted the initial process, which it happens more frequently in a service environment where the process isn't something that's physical and visual in front of you. It's likely in a computer screen. So it's that disconnect between, we thought we were going to do this, here's what actually happened, and so there's a frustration, which then after that leads to more people becoming a little more resistant if you're working that same group of people again, to change something else. They're like, yeah, well, this other time we did this and it didn't quite turn out this way. And so it's managing those expectations and saying, hey, we've done our analysis. We're not going to let perfection get in the way of progress. We're going to move forward with this new solution, this countermeasure. And if it doesn't work, we're going to evaluate why. So following that PDCA or PDSA cycle, and then reevaluate and act again and go back and try it again. So that creates a little bit of some, I guess I would say, secondary obstacles after you actually implemented this solution. But as long as you set those expectations and explain to people what your process is going to be, if and when that happens, it helps to knock those barriers down in the future.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a Gemba Academy customer today. This guy's a very smart engineer, very similar in nature to you. In fact, talking to him, and just really calculated and super smart. And he said, unfortunately, they were doing a SMED quick changeover, and this organization was really hung up on what kind of benefits they were going to get after doing this SMED, and they were trying to set a very specific target and this and that. And they were spending days and days. I said, listen, come on, set a goal, 50%. How about that? And see how close you can get to it. Maybe you beat it. Maybe you approach it, but make it better. Right. And so I think sometimes we can go off on a deep end and just, we won't even take action because we're just so paralyzed with what's going to happen. Well, let's see. Run the experiment, right? And
it's the analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
Now, my supervisor now likes to always say, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but let's use the marine approach. You have 70% of the information. You've done 70% of the analysis. Let's move, because the other 30%. It's going to take you more effort than the previous 70%, and you're probably never going to get it, and then you're never going to move forward. So if you got that much, just go and then learn as you go.
Yep, exactly. So, all right. Well, hey, last question I have for you, Kyle, in this section. Talk about the journey, overall, and do you think it's been worth it? Like all the hard work and all the effort?
Absolutely. Just for me personally, the growth has been, I don't know how I can measure it. I mean, I've only been out of college for 8 years now. So I've had a relatively short career, in the continuous improvement area, but I feel that it personally has helped me improve myself and identify my opportunities that exist within my own self and my skills and my competencies to better myself, which is then translated into me kind of accelerating faster in my career. But from an actual, tactical day-to-day piece, the journey, I say that it's, I tell people that continuous improvement isn't glamorous, especially at the beginning. And I like to show the picture there's a GE commercial that came out 2-3 years ago, I think, around ideas and how they're ugly. And it shows this like ugly looking creature, and it kind of goes through, with the right nurturing and the right environment, it can turn into something beautiful. And that's kind of how I view continuous improvement. It starts off kind of ugly. There's certain things you have to get going, and it never goes as smoothly as you think. You can have all the education, you can have all the leadership support, and all the resources you need. But those first few projects and things of that nature, they may not go the way you're expecting. But yeah, it's definitely worth it to push through those. Those could be viewed as obstacles because things don't turn out the way that the people thought that they should. You don't necessarily always get all those quick wins. But yeah, and then at the end of the day, what really makes it worth it, to the company is, there's hopefully some bottom line impact. You're saving time, so you're increasing your capacity to do more with your current people. You're collaborating more with your people doing the work, so you're improving that employee engagement factor, which is so critical in the workforce today. And then for me personally, it's just seeing others succeed. So when I'm able to help someone else have that aha moment, it's easy for them to see what a problem is, but then working with them to identify themselves, what does that need to change to make this better? When the light bulb goes off, that's very rewarding to me. And that's what motivates me to keep on doing what I do. And then that just keeps that cycle going of helping one person, one team at a time, and expanding that out. And it starts to have some long-term returns. You're not gonna see these huge returns necessarily off the gate, but if you can stick with it for 1 or 2 years and get through the initial, quote unquote ugliness, then you'll start to see those large returns that are sustainable and carry your company into the next generation.
Yeah, love it. Good stuff. All right, Kyle. Well, let's jump into the reflection section. And before we hit record, you said you were ready for my standard questions. So I got to throw you some curveballs here, man. I got to pull out some different ones.
All right. Well,
here.
Full disclosure, I've not played baseball in a while, so I'm going to be able to hit.
Yeah, I got a change up coming here. All right. Well, hey. So, what about? Let's see. Is there an area of lean that you struggle with, or maybe you wonder if it even actually works?
Great question. So last fall, I started to become more curious about humble inquiry, because I'd heard that so often, and just learning to ask better questions to get people to identify, what's going on in an area, or understand problems, or why something needs to change. But that takes a lot of patience to do that. So I started reading the book Humble Inquiry. Haven't finished it yet. But that's an area that I feel like I struggle with, because sometimes I just like to get right to the point, and I like to ask some open-ended questions, but then my impatience gets in, and I just kind of want to get us to that answer. So I start throwing out more pointed questions, more black and white questions that aren't really causing those that I'm working with to think. And at the end of the day, that's what we want people to do. We want them to think. Because that's where we get the best ideas. So just, I think that practice, the practice of humble inquiry, is great, and I think it's useful. It's just I struggle with right now. That's an area where I could use some development to ask better questions. Got
it. So looking back on your kind of 8 years, out of school and working within the lean world and just business in general, if you could go back and do one thing differently, what would it be and why, if anything?
Well, I wouldn't be a true lean thinker if I didn't think there was any opportunity or area for improvement, would I? I would actually say I would go all the way back to my college days, and some of those operational classes that I took, and just take the time to pay more attention, because now looking back, I had opportunities there where I could have gained a lot more knowledge, a lot more actually experience, probably even met some of the people that you hear about in the lean world, that have written the books, that are the speakers that have, been credited with the lean transformations. And that would have definitely got me going a little faster when I got out of college, in the workforce. So there's that. I would offer that bit of advice to anyone in college right now who is in really any type of role, but specifically if you're in an engineering type of role, or even a business administration type of degree. Take every opportunity to learn about, just doesn't have to be lean, but just continuous improvement in general. Learn about it and embrace it, and learn as much as you can about it.
Last question. Do you practice lean at home or in your personal life?
Actually, I do. I actually started last year working on a personal A3, just to kind of get an idea of where some of my blind spots, what can I work on in 2018. So I do practice it in that way, and it's whenever we have little household projects, I'll put together little action plans. I'll keep little post-it notes up, and I'll kind of move them like a little Kanban system of what's done, what needs to be done. And I'm trying to convince my wife to let me test some 5S with the kitchen.
Oh man, I was just about to say, don't try to 5S your wife's pantry.
Yeah, I told her, because we always, she's like, there's one way to load a dishwasher, and I'm like, well, that may be, but I think we can. So I'm not allowed to load the dishwasher because I don't do it the right way. And I'm picking on my wife here, but we joke about it. I'm like, honey, actually, I saw there's a video out there. I think is it a Gimba Academy?
Yeah, it's my daughter's.
Video?
It's my daughter's. Yeah.
So I watched it, and I'm like, I watched this video, and I want to try this.
Yeah.
I don't want to make you try, but I want to try this just to show you how we can maybe improve this kitchen operation, since our lives revolve around it so much here at home. And
yeah.
So speaking of that change obstacle, I'm working past that one right now.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, good stuff, Kyle. I'm so glad we got to connect. Keep up the great work on LinkedIn. Now, as far as connecting with you, is LinkedIn, I guess, the best way?
Yeah, that's definitely the best way. I'm most active on there, and if you shoot me a message or a connection request on there, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
And go ahead and spell your name out, Kyle.
Kumpf. That's K-U-M as in mother, P as in Peter, F as in Frank.
Okay, Kyle Kumpf. All right. Well,
yes.
We'll find you over on the LinkedIn's and all the rest of it, and we'll keep up the great work. Do you ever get out to any conferences? Going to go to the AME this year or anything like that?
I would love to get out to more conferences. I went to one last year. It's the Iowa Lean Consortium one.
Yeah.
I'll plan on going to that one again this year because I think they're bringing in one of the keynotes is Lancaster.
Jim?
Jim, yes.
Yeah,
so
Lantec. Yeah.
Lantec, sorry. Yeah, Jim Lancaster Lantec, right?
Yep.
So I definitely got there for that one. That's really the only one on my calendar this year.
Yeah.
But next year I'm planning on getting out to more and getting to some of the bigger ones and, and connecting with the Lean community more. But for now, I can connect with them via LinkedIn. And
yeah. Hey, Iowa's got some good little conferences over there, man. We go out to several of them. Gimba Academy does, and they're not huge, a few hundred people, but there's some really good. Pella Windows is out there.
Yeah.
Some really strong companies out in that part of
the
country.
There's a lot of them here, and it's actually good because they are smaller. Yeah. So I feel like you can get more out of them.
Yep.
But yeah, I get to, but then you can you're more likely to be able to get in with the keynotes and the speakers and just pick their brain. And I find that they've been very responsive to that, which is great.
Yep, very cool, very cool. All right, well, keep up the good work, my man, and I'll catch you over on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ron.
All right, take care. Thanks for listening to the Gimba Academy podcast. Now, we invite you to take a no-strings-attached, fully functional test drive of GimbaAcademy.com. Gain immediate access to more than 1,000 Lean and Six Sigma learning resources, all free of charge at GimbaAcademy.com.